This is a continuation of The Big Time by Fritz Leiber, comprising chapters 5 through 7. Chapter 5. Sid insists on ghost girls. Whenever I take up a newspaper and read it, I fancy I see ghosts creeping between the lines. There must be ghosts all over the world. They must be as countless as the grains of the sands, it seems to me. Ibsen. My Elizabethan boyfriend put his fists on his hips and laid down the law to us, as if we were a lot of nervous children who'd been playing too hard. Look, you masters, this is a recuperation station, and I am running it as such, a plague of all operations. I care not if the frame of things disjoints and the whole change world goes to ruin. But you, warrior maid, are going to rest and drink more wine slowly before you tell your tale, and your colleagues are going to be properly companioned. No questions, anyone. Bo, and you love us. Give us a lively tune. KB relaxed a little and let him put his hand carefully against her back in token of support, and she said grudgingly, "All right, fat belly." Then, so help me, to the tune of the Muskrat Ramble, which I'd taught Bo, we got girls for those two ETs and everybody properly paired up. Right here I want to point out that a lot of the things they say in the change world about recuperation stations simply aren't so. And anyway, they always leave out 9/10 of it. The soldiers that come through the door are looking for a good time, sure, but they're hurt real bad too, every one of them, deep down in their minds and hearts, if not always in their bodies, or so you can see it right away. Believe me, a temporal operation is no joke, and to start with, there isn't one person in 100 who can endure to be cut from his lifeline and become a really wide-awake doubleganger. A demon, that is, let alone a soldier. What does a badly hurt and mixed-up creature need who's been fighting hard? One individual to look out for him and feel for him and patch him up, and it helps if the one is of the opposite sex. That's something that goes beyond species. There's your basis for the place and the wild way it goes about its work, and also for most other recuperation stations or entertainment spots. The name entertainer can be misleading, but I like it. She's got to be a lot more than a good party girl, or boy. Though she's got to be that too. She's got to be a nurse and a psychologist and an actress and a mother and a practical ethnologist and a lot of things with longer names. And a reliable friend. None of us are all those things perfectly, or even near it. We just try. But when the call comes, entertainers have to forget grudges and gripes and envies and jealousies. And remember, they're lively people with sharp emotions, because there isn't any time then for anything but help, and don't ask who. And, deep inside her, a good entertainer doesn't care who. Take the way it shaped up this time. It was pretty clear to me I ought to shift to Illy, although I wasn't quite easy in my mind about leaving Eric, because the Lunan was a long time from home and, after all, Eric was among anthropoids. Ilhilihis needed someone who was simpatico. I like Illy, and not just because he is a sort of tall cross between a spider monkey and a Persian cat, though that is a handsome combo when you come to think of it. I like him for himself. So when he came in all lopped and shaky after a mean operation, I was the right person to look out for him. Now I've made my little speech and know-nothings in the change world can go on making their bum jokes. But I ask you, how could an arrangement between Illy and me be anything but platonic? We might have had some octopoid girls and nymphs in stock, Sid couldn't be sure until he checked, but Ilhilihis and 7C voted for real people, and I knew Sid saw it their way. Maud squeezed Mark's hand and tripped over to 7C. "Those are sharp hoofs you got, man." She's picked up some of my language, like she has everything else. Though Bo did frown over his shoulder at Lily from the piano. Maybe to argue that she ought to take on the ET, as Mark had been a real casualty and could use live nursing. But it was plain as day to anybody but Bo that Bruce and Lily were a big thing and the last to be disturbed. Eric acted stiffly hurt at losing me, but I knew he wasn't. He thinks he has a great technique with ghost girls, and he likes to show it off, and he really is pretty slick at it, if you go for that sort of thing and yang my yin, who doesn't at times? And when Sid formally wafted the Countess out of stores, a real blonde stunner in a white satin hobble skirt with a white egret swaying up from her tiny hat, way ahead of Maud and Lily and me when it came to looks, though transparent as cigarette smoke. And when Eric clicked his heels and bowed over her hand and proudly conducted her to a couch, black Svengali to her trilby, and started to German talk some life into her with much head cocking and toothy smiling and a flow of witty flattery. And when she began to flirt back and the dream look in her eyes sharpened hungrily and focused on him, well, then I knew that Eric was happy and felt he was doing proud by the Reichswehr. No, my little commandant wasn't worrying me on that score. Mark had drawn a Greek hetera, name of Phryne. I suppose not the one who maybe still does the famous courtroom striptease back in Athens. And he was waking her up with little sips of his scotch and soda, though, from some looks he'd flashed, I got the idea KB was the kid he really went for. Sid was coaxing the fighting gal to take some high-energy bread and olives along with the wine. And, for a wonder, Doc seemed to be carrying on an animated and rational conversation with 7C and Maud, maybe comparing notes on the northern Venusian shallows. And Bo had got onto Panther Rag, and Bruce and Lily were leaning on the piano, smiling very appreciatively but talking to each other a mile a minute. Illy turned back from inspecting them all and squeaked, "Animals with clothes are so refreshing, darling. Like you're all carrying banners." Maybe he had something there, though my banners were kind of Ash Wednesday, a charcoal gray sweater and skirt. He looked at my mouth with a tentacle to see how I was smiling, and he squeaked softly, "Do I seem dull and commonplace to you, Greta girl, because I haven't got banners? Just another zombie from a billion years in your past, as gray and lifeless as Luna is today. Not as when she was a real dreamy sister planet simply bursting with air and water and feather forests? Or am I as strangely interesting to you as you are to me, girl from a billion years in my future?" "Illy, you're sweet," I told him, giving him a little pat. I noticed his fur was still vibrating nervously, and I decided the heck with Sid's orders. I'm going to pump him about what he was doing with KB and the satyr. Couldn't have him a billion years from home and bottled up, too. Besides, I was curious. Chapter 6. Crete, circa 1300 BC. Maiden, nymph, and mother are the eternal royal trinity of the island, and the goddess, who is worshipped there in each of these aspects, as new moon, full moon, and old moon, is the sovereign deity. Graves. KB pushed back at Sid some seconds of bread and olives, and when he raised his bushy eyebrows, gave him a curt nod that meant she knew what she was doing. She stood up and sort of took a position. All the talk quieted down fast, even Bruce's and Lily's. KB's face and voice weren't strained now, but they weren't relaxed either. "Woe to Spider! Woe to Cretan! Heavy is the news I bring you. Bear it bravely, like strong women. When we got the gun unlimbered, I heard seaweed fry and crackle. We three leaped behind the rock wall, saw our gun grow white as sunlight in a heat ray of the serpents. Natch. We feared we were outnumbered, and I called upon my caller. I don't know how she does it, but she does, in English too. That is, when she figures she's got something important to report, and maybe she needs a little time to get ready. Bo claims that all the ancients fit their thoughts into measured lines as naturally as we pick a word that will do, but I'm not sure how good the Vicksburg language department is. Though why I should wonder about things like that when I've got KB spouting the stuff right in front of me, I don't know. There was an indignant murmur at this, for our cutthroat change war has its code, the soldiers tell me. Being an entertainer, I don't have to say what I think. They had seen us when we saw them, KB swept on, and they loosed a killing volley. Heat and knife rays struck about us in a storm of wind and fire, and the Lunan lost a feeler fighting for Crete's triple goddess. So we dodged behind a sandhill, steered our flight back toward the water. It was awful, what we saw there. Crete's brave ships all sunk or sinking, blue skies sullied by their death smoke. Once again the Greeks had licked us, aided by the filthy serpents. Round our wrecks, their black ships scurried, like black beetles, filth their diet, yet this day they dine on heroes. On the quiet sunlit beach there, I could feel a change gale blowing, working changes deep inside me, aches and pains that were as strangers. Half my memories were doubled, half my lifeline crooked and twisted, 3 new moles upon my sword hand. Goddess, goddess, triple goddess. Her voice wavered, and Sid reached out a hand, but she straightened her back. Triple goddess. Give me courage to tell everything that happened. We ran down into the water, hoping to escape by diving. We had hardly gotten under when the heat rays hit above us, turning all the cool green surface to a roaring white inferno. But as I believe I told you, I was calling on my caller, and a door now opened to us, deep below the deadly steam clouds. We dived in like frightened minnows, and a lot of water with us. Off Chicago's Gold Coast, Dave once gave me a lesson in skin diving, and remembering it, I got a flash of KB's door in the dark depths. For a moment, all was chaos. Then the door slammed shut behind us. We'd been picked up in time's nick by an express room of our spiders, sloshing 2 feet deep in water, much more cramped for space than this place. It was manned by a magician, an old coot named Benson Carter. He dispelled the water quickly and reported on his caller. We'd got dry, were feeling human. Illy here had shed his swimsuit when we looked at the maintainer. It was glowing, changing, melting. And when Benson Carter touched it, he fell backward. Death was in him. Then the void began to darken, narrow, shrink and close around us, so I called upon my caller. Without wasting time, let me tell you. We can't say for sure what was it slowly squeezed that sweet express room, but we fear the dirty snakes have found a way to find our places and attack outside the cosmos. Found the spiderweb that links us in the void's gray less than nothing. No murmur this time. This reaction was genuine. We'd been hit where we lived, and I could see everybody was scared as sick as I was. Except maybe Bruce and Lily, who were still holding hands and beaming gently. I decided they were the kind that love makes brave, which it doesn't do to me. It just gives me 2 people to worry about. I can see you dig our feelings, KB continued. This thing scared the pants off of us. If we could have, we'd have even introverted the maintainer, broken all the ties that bind us, chanced it incommunicado. But the little old maintainer was a seething red-hot puddle filled with bubbles big as handballs. We sat tight and watched the void close. I kept calling on my caller. I squeezed my eyes shut, but that made it easier to see the 3 of them with the void shutting down on them. Was ours still behaving? Yes, BB Miriam. Poetry or no poetry, it got me. Benson Carter, lying dying, also thought the snakes had done it. And he knew that death was in him, so he whispered me his mission, giving me precise instructions. How to press the 7 death's hands, starting lockside counterclockwise. 1, 3, 5, 6, 2, 4, 7. Then you have a half an hour. After you have pressed the 7, do not monkey with the buttons. Get out fast and don't stop moving. I wasn't getting this part, and I couldn't see that anyone else was, though Bruce was whispering to Lily. I remembered seeing skulls engraved on the bronze chest. I looked at Illy, and he nodded a tentacle and spread 2 to say, I guessed that yes, Benson Carter had said something like that, but no, Illy didn't know much about it. All these things and more, he whispered, KB went on, with the last gasps of his life force, telling all his secret orders, for he'd not been sent to get us. He was on a separate mission when he heard my SOSs. Sid, it's you he was to contact as the first leg of his mission. Pick up from you 3 black hussars, Death's Head demons, daring soldiers, then to wait until the place's next match rhythm with the cosmos. Matter of 2 mealtimes, barely. And to tune in northern Egypt in the age of the last Caesar, in the year of Rome's swift downfall, there to start an operation in a battle near a city named for Thrace's Alexander. There to change the course of battle, blow sky high the stinking serpents, all their agents, all their zombies. Goddess, pardon. Now I savvy how you've guided my least footstep, when I thought you'd gone and left me, for I flubbed your 3-mole signal. We've found Sid's place, that's the first leg, and I see the 3 black hussars, and we've brought with us the weapon and the Parthian disguises, salvaged from the doomed express room when your door appeared in time's nick, and the room around us closing spewed us through before it vanished with the corpse of Benson Carter. Triple goddess, draw the milk now from the womanhood I flaunt here and inject the blackest hatred. Vengeance now upon the serpents, vengeance sweet in northern Egypt, for your island, Crete goddess, and a victory for the spiders, goddess, goddess, we can swing it. The roar that made me try to stop my ears with my shoulders didn't come from KB, she'd spoken her piece, but from Sid. The dear boy was purple enough to make me want to remind him you can die of high blood pressure just as easy in the change world. Dump me with ops! Splud, I'll not endure it. Is this a battle post? They'll be mounting operations from field hospitals next. Kabisha Labris, thou art mad to suggest it. And what's this prattle of locks, clocks, and death's heads, buttons and monkeys? This brabble, this farrago, this hocus pocus? And where's the weapon you prayed of? In that whoreson bronze casket, I suppose. She nodded, looking blank and almost a little shy as poetic possession faded from her. Her answer came like its faltering last echo. It is nothing but a tiny tactical atomic bomb. Chapter 7. Time to think. After about 0.1 millisecond, 1/10,000th part of a second, has elapsed, the radius of the ball of fire is some 45 feet, and the temperature is then in the vicinity of 300,000 degrees centigrade. At this instant, the luminosity, as observed at a distance of 100,000 yards, 5.7 miles, is approximately 100 times that of the sun, as seen at the Earth's surface. The ball of fire expands very rapidly to its maximum radius of 450 feet within less than a second from the explosion. Los Alamos. Brother, that was all we needed to make everybody but Cabby and the two ETs start yelping at once, me included. It may seem strange that change people, able to whiz through time and space and roust around outside the cosmos, and knowing at least by hearsay of weapons a billion years in the future, like the mind bomb, should panic at being shut in with a little primitive mid-20th century gadget. Well, they feel the same as atomic scientists would feel if a Bengal tiger were brought into their laboratory, neither more nor less scared. Yet in a free corner of my mind, I was shocked at how badly we were all panicking. It made me admit what I didn't like to. That we were all in pretty much the same state as Doc, except that the bottle didn't happen to be our out. And had the rest of us been controlling our drinking so well lately? Maud yelled, "Jettison it!" and pulled away from the satyr and ran from the bronze chest. Bo, harking back to what they'd thought of doing in the express room when it was too late, hissed, "Sirs, we must introvert," and vaulted over the piano bench and legged it for the control divan. Eric seconded him with a white-faced "Gott in Himmel, ja," from beside the surly, forgotten countess, holding by its slim stem an empty, rose-stained wine glass. I felt my mind flinch, because introverting a place is several degrees worse than foxholing. It's supposed not only to keep the door tight shut, but also to lock it so even the change winds can't get through, cut the place loose from the cosmos altogether. I'd never talked with anyone from a place that had been introverted. Mark dumped Phryne off his lap and ran after Maud. The Greek ghost girl, quite solid now, looked around with sleepy fear and fumbled her apple-green chiton together at the throat. She wrenched my attention away from everyone else for a moment, and I couldn't help wondering whether the person or zombie back in the cosmos, from whose lifeline the ghost has been taken, doesn't at least have strange dreams or thoughts when something like this happens. Sid stopped Bo, though he almost got bowled over doing it, and he held the gambler away from the maintainer in a bear hug and bellowed over his shoulders, "Masters, are you mad? Have you lost your wits? Maud, Mark, Marcus, Magdalene, on your lives, unhand that casket!" Maud had swept the clothes and bows and quivers and stuff off it, and was dragging it out from the bar toward the door sector, so as to dump it through fast when we got one, I guess, while Mark acted as if he were trying to help her and wrestle it away from her at the same time. They kept on as if they hadn't heard a word Sid said, with Mark yelling, "Let go, Meritrix!" This holds Rome's answer to Parthia on the Nile. KB watched them as if she wanted to help Mark but scorned to scuffle with a mere, well, Mark had said it in Latin, I guess, call girl. Then, on the top of the bronze chest, I saw those 7 lousy skulls starting at the lock as plain as if they'd been under a magnifying glass, though ordinarily they'd have been a vague circle to my eyes at the distance, and I lost my mind and started to run in the opposite direction. But Illy whipped 3 tentacles around me, gentle-like, and squeaked, "Easy now, Greta girl. Don't you be doing it too. Hold still, or Papa spank. My, but you 2-leggers can whirl about when you have a mind to." My stampede had carried his featherweight body a couple of yards, but it stopped me, and I got my mind back, partly. Then my fat friend from Lynn Regis looked real distraught at the void and blustered at no one in particular. "'Sdeath. Think you I'd mutiny against my masters, desert the spiders, go to ground like a spent fox, and pull my hole in after me? A plague of such cowardice. Who suggests it? Introversion's no mere last-ditch device. Unless ordered, supervised, and sanctioned, it means the end. And what if I'd introverted ere we got KB's call for succor, hey? His warrior maid nodded with harsh approval, and he noticed it and shook his free hand at her and scolded her. Not that I say yea to your mad plan for that devil's casket, you half-clad lackwit. And yet to jettison. Oh, ye gods. Ye gods. He wiped his hand across his face. Grant me a minute in which I may think. Thinking time wasn't an item even on the strictly limited list at the moment, although 7C, squatting dourly on his hairy haunches where Maud had left him, threw in a deadpan, "Best tellin' 'em, Gov." Then Doc at the bar stood up tall as Abe Lincoln in his top hat and shawl and 19th century duds, and raised an unwavering arm for silence, and said something that sounded like introversh, inversh, glovsh, and then his enunciation switched to better than perfect as he continued, "I know to an absolute certainty what we must do." It showed me how rabbity we were that the place got quiet as a church while we all stopped whatever we were doing and waited breathless for a poor drunk to tell us how to save ourselves. He said something like, "Inversh, bosh," and held our eyes for a moment longer. Then the light went out of his, and he slobbered out a Nichevo, and slid an arm far along the bar for a bottle, and started to pour it down his throat without stopping sliding. Before he completed his collapse to the floor, in the split second while our attention was still focused on the bar, Bruce vaulted up on top of it, so fast it was almost like he'd popped up from nowhere, though I'd seen him start from behind the piano. "I've a question. Has anyone here triggered that bomb?" he said in a voice that was very clear and just loud enough. "So it can't go off," he went on, after just the right pause, his easy grin and brisk manner putting more heart into me all the time. "What's more, if it were to be triggered, we'd still have half an hour. I believe you said it had that long a fuse." He stabbed a finger at KB. She nodded. "Right," he said. "It'd have to be that long for whoever plants it in the Parthian camp to get away. There's another safety margin." Second question. Is there a locksmith in the house? For all Bruce's easiness, he was watching us like a golden eagle, and he caught Beau's and Maud's affirmatives before they had a chance to explain or hedge them and said, "That's very good. Under certain circumstances, you two'd be the ones to go to work on the chest. But before we consider that, there's question 3. Is anyone here an atomics technician?" That one took a little conversation to straighten out, Illy having to explain that, yes, the early Lunans had atomic power. Hadn't they blasted the life off their planet with it and made all those ghastly craters? But no, he wasn't a technician exactly. He was a thinger. I thought at first his squeakbox was lisping. What was a thinger? Well, a thinger was someone who manipulated things in a way that was truly impossible to describe. But no, you couldn't possibly thing atomics. The idea was quite ridiculous, so he couldn't be an atomics thinger. The term was worse than a contradiction. Well, really? While 7C, from his 2000 millennia advantage of the Lunan, grunted to the effect that his culture didn't rightly use any kind of power, but just sort of moved satyrs and stuff by wrestling space-time around. Or think 'em round if we have to. Can't think 'em in the void, though, was luck. Have to have, I don't know what. Done have it anyhow. So we don't have an A-Tech, Bruce summed up, which makes it worse than useless, downright dangerous, to tamper with the chest. We wouldn't know what to do if we did get inside safely. One more question. He directed it towards Sid. How long before we can jettison anything? Sid, looking a shade jealous, yet mostly grateful for the way Bruce had calmed his chickens, started to explain, but Bruce didn't seem to be taking any chance of losing his audience, and as soon as Sid got to the word rhythm, he pulled the answer away from him. In brief, not until we can effectively tune in on the cosmos again. Thank you, Master Lessingham. That's at least 5 hours, 2 mealtimes, as the Cretan officer put it. And he threw KB a quick, soldierly smile. So, whether the bomb goes to Egypt or elsewhere, there's not a thing we can do about it for 5 hours. All right, then. His smile blinked out like a light, and he took a couple of steps up and down the bar, as if measuring the space he had. 2 or 3 cocktail glasses sailed off and popped, but he didn't seem to notice them, and we hardly did either. It was creepy the way he kept staring from one to another of us. We had to look up. Behind his face, with the straight golden hair flirting around it, was only the void. "All right then," he repeated suddenly. "We're 12 spiders and 2 ghosts, and we've time for a bit of a talk. And we're all in the same bloody boat, fighting the same bloody war. So we'll all know what we're talking about. I raised the subject a while back, but I was steamed up about a glove, and it was a big jest. All right, but now the gloves are off." Bruce ripped them out of his belt where they'd been tucked and slammed them down on the bar to be kicked off the next time he paced back and forth. And it wasn't funny. "Because," he went right on, "I've been getting a completely new picture of what this spider's war has been doing to each one of us. Oh, it's jolly good sport to slam around in space and time and then have a rugged little party outside both of them when the operation's over. It's sweet to know there's no cranny of reality so narrow, no privacy so intimate or sacred, no wall of was or will be strong enough that we can't shoulder in. Knowledge is a glamorous thing, sweeter than lust or gluttony or the passion of fighting, and including all three, the ultimate insatiable hunger, and it's great to be Faust, even in a pack of other Fausts. It's sweet to jigger reality, to twist the whole course of a man's life or a culture's, to ink out his or its past and scribble in a new one, and be the only one to know and gloat over the changes. Ha! Killing men or carrying off women isn't in it for glutting the sense of power. It's sweet to feel the change winds blowing through you, and know the past that were and the past that is and the past that may be. It's sweet to wield the Atropos and cut a zombie or unborn out of his lifeline, and look the doubleganger in the face and see the resurrection glow in it, and recruit a brother. Welcome a newborn fellow demon into our ranks, and decide whether he'll best fit as soldier, entertainer, or what. Or he can't stand resurrection. It fries or freezes him. And you've got to decide whether to return him to his lifeline and his zombie dreams, only they'll be a little grayer and horrider than they were before, or whether, if she's got that tantalizing something, to bring her shell along for a ghost girl. That's sweet, too. It's even sweet to have change death poised over your neck, to know that the past isn't the precious, indestructible thing you've been taught it was. To know that there's no certainty about the future either, whether there'll even be one. To know that no part of reality is holy. That the cosmos itself may wink out like a flicked switch and God be not and nothing left but nothing. He threw out his arms against the void. And knowing all that, it's doubly sweet to come through the door into the place and be out of the worst of the change winds and enjoy a well-earned recuperation and share the memories of all these sweetnesses I've been talking about. And work out all the fascinating feelings you've been accumulating back in the cosmos, layer by black layer, in the company of and with the help of the best bloody little band of fellow Fausts and Faustines going, "Oh, it's a sweet life, all right, but I'm asking you." And here his eyes stabbed us again, one by one, fast. "I'm asking you what it's done to us. I've been getting a completely new picture, as I said, of what my life was, and what it could have been if there'd been changes of the sort that even we demons can't make, and what my life is. I've been watching how we've all been responding to things just now, to the news of St. Petersburg, and to what the Cretan officer told beautifully. Only it wasn't beautiful what she had to tell, and mostly to that bloody box of bomb. And I'm simply asking each one of you, what's happened to you?" He stopped his pacing and stuck his thumbs in his belt and seemed to be listening to the wheels turning in at least 11 other heads. Only I stopped mine pretty quick, with Dave and Father and the Rape of Chicago coming up out of the dark on the turn, and Mother in the Indiana Dunes and Jazz Limited just behind them, followed by the unthinkable thing the Spider Doctor had flicked into existence when I flopped as a nurse, because I can't stand that to be done to my mind by anybody but myself. I stopped them by using the old infallible entertainer's gimmick, a fast survey of the most interesting topic there is, other people's troubles. I didn't stop for the 2 ETs, they're too hard to figure, or for Doc. Nobody can tell whether a fallen down drunk's at the black or bright end of his cycle, you just know it's cycling. Maud ought to be suffering as much as Beau, called names and caught out in a panic, which always hurts her because she's plus 300 years more future than the rest of us, and figures she ought to be that much wiser, which she isn't always. Not to mention she's over 50 years old, though her home-century cosmetic science keeps her looking and acting teenage most of the time. She'd backed away from the bronze chest so as not to stand out, and now Lily came from behind the piano and stood beside her. Lily had the opposite of troubles, a great big glow for Bruce, proud as a promised princess watching her betrothed. Eric frowned when he saw her, for he seemed proud too, proud of the way his camarade had taken command of us panicky wax Führer fashion. Sid still looked mostly grateful, and inclined to let Bruce keep on talking. Even KB and Mark, those two dragons hot for battle, standing a little in front and to one side of us by the bronze chest, like its guardians, seemed willing to listen. They made me realize one reason Sid had for letting Bruce run on, although the path his talk was leading us down was flashing with danger signals. When it was over, there'd still be the problem of what to do with the bomb, and a real opposition shaping up between soldiers and entertainers, and Sid was hoping a solution would turn up in the meantime, or at least was willing to put off the evil day. But beyond all that, and like the rest of us, I could tell from the way Sid was squinting his broy eyes and chewing his beardy lip that he was shaken and moved by what Bruce had said. This new boy had dipped into our hearts and counted our kicks so beautifully, better than most of us could have done, and then somehow turned them around so that we had to think of what messes and heels and black sheep and lost lambs we were. Well, we wanted to keep on listening. This concludes the third part of 7 total of The Big Time by Fritz Leiber, produced by Best Audiobooks for free.